What inspired you to write your latest book on iOS interviews?
Okay, so I think the question is like short, but the answer is not that short for me. I'll take you back to why we started creating this, all the content that we create, and why we wrote the book, and what is inspired us to create the book. So, cut back to 2021 when we started Swift Anytime as a community and started creating content for free as a team of iOS developers from India. So we used to write articles in the initial phase, and we saw that people were liking what we were creating at that time. So we started organizing offline meetups all around India, mostly in Delhi, Bangalore, and other major cities, metropolitan cities. And we found that the community is liking to gel up with each other, to learn from each other, and we also loved that. Along with our job, we were doing this, so we were enjoying engaging with our own community. I hope you also like the same thing. In this year, like 2023, we released the book. Like I'm cutting this short. So we released the book in 2023 around July. And the reason behind releasing the book was that for last 1.5 year, we all are seeing that there are being massive layoffs. The job market is not really going that great, and people are looking for opportunities. They keep messaging us and our team for if they can refer somebody at their company, and they keep posting on LinkedIn, on Slack communities, and whatnot. So we thought that why don't we create something that can help people to at least help them in their process of preparing for their interviews, at least 90%, if not 100, right? So that's when we sat together as a team and decided to create a resource, which eventually turned out to be an ebook that can have the best content, refined content. And for that we decided to talk to a lot of people from the community all around the world, mostly senior iOS engineers, so that they can give their inputs on what they feel is mostly asked and what is missing in most of the candidates if they interview them. So we figured that there are around 350 to 400 questions that we came across by going through this process, and we were just thinking loud that what if we create answers for all of them? It would have taken like maybe a year for us to complete that book if we were going ahead with 350 or 400 questions. So we decided to filter them down to 100 questions only, but those 100 questions should be like the most wanted sort of questions for the iOS interviews. And that's how we filtered them out. We wrote answers for them, we sent them back to all the people we interviewed with, and they gave their feedback, their contribution to the same. We refined the book, and we released the final copy in the month of July this year, and people liked it. So that's a win-win for both of us, like for Swift Anytime and the whole community. If they're liking it and if they are getting the value out of that, our job is done, right? And also there was one more factor that pushed us, not like that factor was not just creating something for the community, but also when you run a community and turn it into a company sort of thing, right? When you move towards a company, then you have a lot of expenses to manage. So me as a founder have a lot of things to take care of, not just the software tools that we use, not just the team that is there with us, but there are other unexpected expenses that happens over the month. So I quit my job last year to pursue Swift Anytime completely. I decided to go ahead with this and leave everything else. And I exhausted my saving this year almost around February. I was thinking that, either we will have to, uh, call it off for the whole team, or we'll have to do
The
something
money
that,
goes quick, right?
yeah, the money goes quick. Earlier you think that you have enough savings and you can manage for maybe a year or two, but the reality is it's it's not that easy, right?
Yeah.
So these were the two reasons why we come up with a monetized product in the form of an ebook. So we had two intentions. We need to create value for the community. At the same time, if we can earn something along with that, then that would be a win-win for both the parties, and that's what actually happened. Our ebook has been taken very well by the community. Almost more than 400 people have bought the book so far on the records, and we have got some really great feedbacks. So we always like when somebody comes back to us and say that, okay, this question that you wrote in the book, I was interviewing this with this company and they asked me the same damn question, and we were like, that's great. So
That
yeah,
is great.
cracking the iOS interview has been great, and we are working on other initiatives now.
Yeah. What's the biggest thing you learned in that process? Like talking to all these developers and like accumulating all these interview questions.
I think the one thing that we figured out of this process was that not everyone knows everything, right? When we used to talk to senior iOS developers from around the globe, we used to see that some people think that there are a set of problems that are not that comfortable to iOS developers when they talk to them, and there are some other people from other side of the world that they think that these are the different set of problems that the people are not that much comfortable, not much comfortable with. So we came across a different, like a variety of opinions and a variety of experience levels during that process, and that became a learning for us because we also had a perception about what people must be looking forward to, right? So when we talked with like more than 50 people in the community, we figured that okay, we now have a whole conclusion of what should be made. So yeah, that was basically our learning.
Yeah. And in for the interview questions, is it like technical stuff on like the Swift, like UI kit Objective C side, or is it or does it also include like data structure and algorithm questions?
So, to be precise, answering your question, there is no DSA at all in the book,
Yeah.
but you would find core iOS interview questions. Like
Mhm.
when I say iOS interview questions, it includes Swift
Yeah.
questions, Swift UI questions, how to modularize your code, all the clean
Mhm.
architecture topics, and all the major topics that are there in iOS development, like maybe
Yeah.
concurrency. So you'll find core questions on all those topics, and we do not approach
Yeah.
those questions as if just having a question and then answering them. We go with the approach of
Mhm.
writing the question first, then answering them well, then having a counter question for that answer, and then answering it again.
Mhm.
So we try to make it as much realistic as possible. When you sit into the interview, you would be able to uh, think out loud that okay, if I answer this, then they would be able to ask me this follow-up question.
Yeah. And how do you feel about like the DSA type questions?
Me personally, as a as a student when I was back in college, I was not that comfortable with DSA, and even today, I feel like it's good. I would not be against DSA, but it's not really that much needed. It depends basically on the company's requirement, right? So if you're working with a startup having
Mhm.
10 employees and they want to build their product, their first product, like the first version, then nobody cares about DSA at that time. But when you have a
Yeah.
product that is used by maybe 1 million people, then you definitely care about TSA because you have to optimize your application. You have to make sure that the performance is great. And for all those things, those fancy things to happen, you have to have a great hold on the basics, the foundational things. And I believe
Mhm.
DSA is one of them. So
Yeah.
that's my diplomatic answer to this question of DSA.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, DSA is always like a tricky subject, right? Because
True that.
I mean,
True
you
that.
don't really you're like typically you don't apply it on the job like as an iOS developer unless maybe you're like at a big company you said where you have like a
Right.
million users, then you have to
Right.
optimize it. And I took a
Exactly.
weird path. Like I did DSA. I learned my DSA in Python. So,
So there's one more question in the community where people ask you that, okay, we want to learn DSA, but which language should we choose to learn DSA? So I think
yeah,
it's a similar question to when people ask you, should we go with Swift UI first or UI kit?
yeah,
Right? Both are great. Like any language is great. It's all about the
mhm,
basics. If DSA is not tightly coupled to any language, it's a
yeah,
it's a whole knowledge in itself. It doesn't require you to pursue only one language or opt any other language. You can take any one, but the whole concept is like how does data structures work, why we use them, and how do they actually perform in our application.
mhm. Yeah, 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 that's like the fundamentals.
Exactly.
So based on like all this like knowledge you gain, like let's say I had an interview next week, right? Let's say next whatever what is day is Tuesday. So next Tuesday, let's say I had an interview. What would you tell me to do? Like what would be your advice?
So I would first ask you, what type of company is that? If that's a like fresh startup, then I would advise
Mhm.
you to go ahead with some projects that you have made before. If you haven't made any project, then you would actually be able to do that in a period of say 1 week if you have that much time, using
Yeah.
Swift UI. If you can do that, because for a new startup, that startup basically consider you on the basis of what you have done so far in terms of practical work.
Mm.
So if you have some projects, under your resume, then you have a green tick mark from their side. Apart from that, the basic hold on like very fundamental topics of iOS development, like having a great hold on Swift language, all the new concepts coming in which were released this year as well, all the new updates to Swift UI. So you must be well updated with whatever is going on in the community, whatever new updates are coming to the
Yeah.
framework or maybe the language that you are using. And apart from this, if you have a great hold on API calls, how to call an API, how to handle the response, how to parse it and whatnot, this much is enough for a fresh startup. They don't want
Yeah.
anything else. Now that's up to like who all interviewed with that startup. Your chart
Mhm.
selection chart will be based on that. But if you prepare this much, then
Mhm.
you should be like good to go with that.
Yeah.
And
And
versus,
it's different for like a different type of company, right?
yeah, if there is like a MNC, so there are two types of MNC to be precise. There is one which works for other clients, like companies like Tawant or maybe TCS, Cognizant. These companies. You might have heard of any of these names.
Mhm.
So these companies has clients. So they are service-based companies. So they also follow the same sort of skill set. They have basic requirements, which I mentioned for the fresh startup. Along with that, you should have a strong resume. With that, I mean that you should be graduated from a reputed college, maybe, and you should have a good CGPA and whatnot. And that is enough for these sort of companies. Now it comes to like the third one is like Mang type of companies. For these companies, you do not really need to
Mhm.
prepare for iOS things, the core iOS things. These companies ask you like competitive coding questions, DSA questions, algorithm questions. Basically,
Yeah.
problem solving is their main focus. And if you're good with problem solving, and even if you're average with iOS core concepts, they consider you, right? Because they want
Mhm.
you to work on problems and solve them. They don't want you to uh, define yourself or contain yourself in one box. So maybe they will assign you a project that concerns with something related to Android development. Maybe tomorrow they will give you something related to iOS development. After a month, they will give you something which is related to web development. So they treat you as a software engineer, not as an iOS engineer at all.
Yeah.
So that varies with companies. I'm not like giving a blanket statement
Mhm.
to it, but that's what I have seen with my friends who are working with maybe Facebook or
Yeah.
Microsoft. They are not attached to only one technology. They are working with multiple over a time period.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I experienced something like that myself when I mean, I didn't go to like a Fang or a type company or Mang. It was like a big financial service company, so
I
yeah,
see.
they had us work on things more than just iOS.
I see.
And for like what about for like the behavioral side or like because let's say I have the technical side on lockdown, right? What about like the behavioral side and like actually communicating what I know? Do you
Okay.
have advice on that?
Behavior round is something that cannot be, uh, that cannot have a format to go ahead with. Otherwise, if you have a format to go ahead with your behavioral round, you will not behave yourself, right? There can be definitely certain values that you should follow while giving that
Mhm.
round of interviews. Uh, but to learn something for behavioral round somewhat dilutes you as a person, and your answers will also get diluted. So the simple roadmap to follow, in my personal opinion, for behavioral round is just be yourself, uh, be kind to the person who is sitting, on the other side,
Yeah.
and don't exaggerate your answers. Just be on the point. Just give a crisp and clear answer to them, and that should be good.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I think that's like solid. That's solid.
what,
Yeah,
what do
and
you
like
think?
maybe
What do you think
practicing
about you?
with a friend. But about behavior rounds, it's I feel like it's something that is very easy to forget about, right? Like as a developer,
Right.
like because you're so focused on the technical side, and even I've been to interviews before, and I totally didn't prepare as much for the behavioral side. And when you don't, I feel like when you don't prepare, you need it's a little tougher because you kind of need to have like some stories. You don't need to have like the whole outline mapped out, but you need to have some stories that you can refer to
Right.
because otherwise like you might like kind of like draw blank and not really like be able to answer the question as well.
That's true. That's true.
So sticking it interviews just a little bit more. What what mistakes do you see developers make?
Mm-hmm. While preparing or while giving the interviews?
While preparing and like going into the interviews, what mistakes do you see
Okay.
people make?
Like based on my limited experience, I would not again, give a blanket statement for that. But in my personal
Yeah.
opinion and observation, I've seen people while preparing for the interviews, they specifically when they learn a certain topic, they restrain themselves to frequently asked questions on those topics. They don't go 360 around that topic. Like for
Mhm.
example, if I talk about say static dispatch and dynamic dispatch, then whenever you ask somebody what is the difference between static dispatch and dynamic dispatch, they talk about classes have inheritance, and when you have inheritance, you have a method inside that subclass. So that's where dynamic dispatch is, whereas static dispatch is this and that. So uh,
Mhm.
they only prepare for those cliche questions that have been already asked. They don't prepare for questions which can revolve around the same topic. For example, like on the same topic, we can have a different question. Maybe the interview will ask you, okay, we have a class, and in that class there are some methods, and we have an extension of that class, and that extension also has certain methods. So will
Mhm.
you be able to use those methods that are written in the extension if you inherit that class? And people are like going balls over those questions. They are not being able to answer it well because they didn't prepare themselves for such variation of that certain topic. And
Mhm.
then they might ask you, okay, if you can inherit them, then is it dynamic dispatch or static dispatch? So
Mhm.
so that's where the main pitfall is, where people only prepare for one type of question for a certain topic. They do not
Oh
prepare
yeah.
the topic from a whole perspective, right?
Mhm.
So
You
that's
don't
what I
like to
think
understand
people
like
need to do.
the fundamentals.
Yeah, that's what the exact like point is, like prepare it well as a topic, not as a question. So
Mhm.
dispatch and static dispatch, dynamic dispatch are topics in itself. So
Yeah.
prepare them as topics, not as versus questions, static versus dispatch or anything like that.
Yeah.
So these are the things which people generally do, which I have seen personally. Apart from this, when they are giving the interviews, uh, when they're asked maybe X thing, they start answering with Y, and then they eventually come to X. So that creates a confusion to the interviewer that, I asked you X and you are answering me Y first, and then you are driving me to X in a way.
Mhm.
So they sometimes get confused with your answer. So don't
Mhm.
over explain. When you're asked to explain, then you do explain that, but don't over explain from your side in the first place. Also, while
Ah.
giving your answers, sometimes people do not support their answers with examples, with practical examples.
Mhm.
So, like if somebody is talking about, say, ARC, so they just tell the definition of ARC. They don't talk about the example that can be attached to that definition. They can take certain example, maybe hypothetically, and they can tell more about the same topic. So that's also something that I feel that people generally miss out while answering the questions in a real interview, and that backfires sometimes.
Yeah, that's a good one because it could probably kind of feel like you memorize the answer
Right,
if you just give like an answer like a one or two sentence answer and you don't give like an example or anything. It can feel
right.
like you just memorize the answer to the question.
Exactly. And it also gives a feeling to the interviewer when you give the example. It also gives them a feeling that you know the topic well, because you can support your argument with a real example. Otherwise, the same thing happens that you just mentioned, that they think like you have mugged up the whole answer and you just, vomiting it out
Yeah.
in front of them.
Yeah. 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 And something that you mentioned, or a thought that was sparked in my head, is so would you say is there a big difference between preparing for like a junior role interview or and a senior role? Is it just like more technical stuff they have to know, or is there other stuff?
There's definitely a difference at the level of technical stuff that they know, like if we
Mm,
compare junior versus even mid-level and seniors, because when you work with a company as an engineer, maybe you started as a junior engineer first, like we mostly do,
mm,
right? Nobody start with the senior role first. So
yeah,
we gradually learn certain things on our journey. Maybe we took 5 years to learn a certain thing. We reached to a certain point in those 5 years. Whereas in the very first year, you come across a very limited scope of things to work with. Like generally, I have seen working, even myself working with only APIs and UI stuff in the very beginning of my career as a 1 year, 2 year experience level. iOS engineer, I used to work with calling the APIs, getting the response, populating that on the screen using a UI table view and whatnot. But when you move, ahead in this journey, you come across certain uh, design pattern decisions that maybe your manager or lead has taken for the project, or maybe you will have to get into that discussion of deciding what should we go ahead with. You may be a part of the discussion where you're talking about the architecture of the product that you're going to build if you're working with a startup, a new startup, or if you're working with a MNC, then maybe you're optimizing what has already been decided and what has already been built. So you learn about design patterns, you learn about architecture, you learn about the clean coding practices, and that takes time. That doesn't happen to you in a single day or maybe in a single year. And again, that comes back to the preparation as well. When you prepare for a role which is a junior level versus senior level, you have these type of differentiations. Junior needs to care about all the basic stuff that's there. They need to be very good with that. And for senior, you can be expected a lot of things which are maybe out of scope sometimes, because every company has different hierarchy structures and different promotion structures as well. In some company, you will find people working as a senior iOS engineer after 4 years of working with them. In some companies, you will find the same person working as a senior iOS engineer after maybe 6 or 7 years of experience. So that also sometimes set some unreal expectations for the people who are interviewing. So you have to have a wide scope open for yourself when you're preparing for senior iOS roles, whereas when you're preparing for mid level or say junior level. Whereas mid level is like in a very wrong spot, I would say, because they are not considered to be junior, and they are not considered at the
yeah,
at the highest level. So they may come across a variety of questions. Sometimes they may
yeah.
ask very basic things, and they get with the round. And in some companies, they may be grilled down with a lot of things. So my message to mid level is like, prepare yourself well for all the things that can be expected out of a senior iOS engineer. Maybe prepare at least 80%
Yeah.
of what senior does, and rest of what you think you should prepare, you should do that.
Yeah, and it's always like a luck of the draw, right? Like it always depends on the interviewer, right? Like
Yeah.
what question they're gonna throw at you.
Yeah, I mean, I have talked to some engineering managers, and some of them say that when it comes to senior iOS engineers, they do not really explicitly mention about clean architecture or anything like that. They talk about team management skills, leadership skills, how good is your communication, how well you can manage the sprints that you have, how well you can manage maybe the DevOps operation that may be there in the project. So it varies based on the company as well as the hiring managers that are there, like the engineering managers that are there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming you've conducted a few interviews before, right? What's your approach? You don't have to get specific if you want, but how do you approach
So
it when you're?
mostly I have taken interviews of either junior or mid level, because when I was at mid level, I was taking interviews of the same experienced people. That was a bit funny
Mm,
to me. At the same time, that gave me a lot of experience as well while interviewing them. Because some people I
mm,
expected them to be answering me well, whereas they did the opposite. And for some, I was expecting they would not be performing, and they performed really well. So
mm.
what was the question exactly? Can you repeat that? I just forgot.
Oh, what's your approach when you have to interview someone?
What's my approach? My approach is basically to ask them first what they feel most comfortable with. So suppose I ask you that, what's your best topic and
Mm.
which particular framework or maybe
Oh,
topic interests you the most. Based on
yeah.
that, we proceed with the questions. So if there is certain topic which even I am not comfortable with, maybe you have worked with ARKit and I haven't, so I would not go that
Mm.
route, right? Because in that way I would not be able to assess you well. So in that particular scenario, I can go with the basics again, or maybe if there is
Mm.
something else in terms of framework or anything core implementation, I can go ahead with that. But yeah, I generally try to approach interviews as an interviewer in terms of what the candidate knows well, and then I try to take things forward in that direction.
Oh, that's really nice.
Yeah,
That's cool, man. That's
because
cool.
in my opinion, interviewers role is to select the people, not to reject the people, right? uh,
Mm.
we as interviewers should, should be empathetic to the people that are sitting, on the other end of the table. So we should try our
Mm.
best to bring out their potential at that time of the interview, so that they can pass that round. Sometimes I have
Yeah.
seen people doing this. Even some of my colleagues used to do that when I was working with the company. They used to grill down the person until he or she just dies in the table. So, so they literally used to grill them down up to a limit that they felt underconfident at a point, right?
Mm.
So that's not a right approach to go ahead with interviews. I believe your job as interviewer is not to make them
Yeah.
feel ashamed of themselves. So if you're not
Yeah.
getting any answers from their side, just wrap it up quickly.
Mhm.
But yeah, if you see some potential, just go ahead with that.
Yeah, that's really good, especially because like these persons or people will potentially be coworkers. So
Yeah.
like
If
if
not
you
in this company, maybe some other company, because people keep rotating their companies, like switching companies.
yeah.
So if maybe you are not working with them in this company, maybe you will switch
Mhm.
someday, and you meet the same person who you grilled down
Yeah.
someday.
Maybe they're
And
gonna
also
be
not just
interviewing
because
you.
of not just because of your personal interest. I think it should be considered as a humanly nature, where you should not really harass them while having the interview,
Mhm.
whereas some people do, which is
Yeah.
unfortunate.
Yeah, that's not like very nice. That's kind of
Yeah,
me
exactly.
just
Exactly.
harassing.
I have particularly seen, like, there's a friend of mine who he's interviewing these days with some companies, and he came across a round in a good company, reputed company, based out of Indonesia, and that company's like the hiring, like the person, the interviewer at that time, he asked my friend that, "Are you comfortable with this topic?" And he said, "Yeah, a little bit." And then he, drove the whole interview around that topic.
Mhm.
So 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 they try to sort of harass you sometimes, but
Yeah.
sometimes there are great interviewers as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. And the last question I really have on like the job and like interview process is, what advice do you have like right now, like during this down market, I would say, for people who are applying?
So currently you would see that, there is high competition in the job market, and for you to be able to stand out, you'll have to do something extra, right? Either you have a
Mhm.
hold on the basics, maybe at the highest level, maybe somebody would not be able to compete with you at that level when it comes to answering a certain topic. Maybe you have worked on certain projects that really stands out, uh, not projects like to do app and whatnot. You should have certain thing
Mhm.
which really works well, which has a good a set of features, and that is also published on the app store. So like there's one more thing. If you have an application made by yourself, like an indie application published on the app store, that's a plus for you if you are preparing as a junior or maybe a mid level, because that proves in itself that you know stuff, right? You know the thing.
Mhm.
uh, Apart from this, definitely, if you really want to grill down into iOS development topics, then you can go ahead with some resources out there which are free of cost. uh, I see there are a lot of articles, videos out there that are for free, so you can prepare for them, right? And eventually, if you want a collective resource, then there is that as well. I would not like to plug it in again.
And then you can get the book.
So
Then you get the book. Yeah, you can plug it in.
that,
You can buy the
that's
book.
your choice. I'm saying that you buy it so that you will be able to achieve it. I think there are a lot of ways
Yeah.
to do the same thing. So if your budget allows, go ahead with that. If your budget doesn't allow, go ahead with the free resources available. Ultimately, there is DSA, which sometimes becomes a filtering round for many companies. So if you go ahead with at least
Yeah.
the basics of DSA, where you prepare the linked list questions, where you prepare stack, queue, all those other topics like tree basic questions, the search questions, like there are many topics in searching as well. If you prepare at least the basic part of DSA, then also you should be good, right? So
Mhm.
don't overstress yourself, but at the same time, make sure that you are standing out with doing something extra than the existing competitors that are there in front of you. Also, diversify when
Yeah.
you apply. Some people apply in a certain region only. Like it's the era of remote jobs, so apply all over the world. You never know where you will get shortlisted
Mhm.
and you will get the round clear as well. So yeah,
Yeah.
especially for people who apply only maybe in their own country or anything like that, look around the world, go to wellfound.com, apply to
Mhm.
multiple companies, read their JDs, and based on that, modify your resume as well. Also, your cover letter based on that, and then apply. Do not apply the same formula with all the companies. Many companies are more oriented towards maybe ML. Some companies are more like I came across an opening some months back, I believe, after DevDev. So this company was expecting you to have experience in Vision OS,
Yeah.
and the experience level that was required was 5 years. So never apply to such companies which has like
Yeah.
which don't like the company that doesn't even know their own basics. So don't apply to those companies. But but yeah, when you apply, make sure that your resume also resonates with what they're asking for, and do not fake that. If you don't have it, don't write that. Whatever you know, whatever you have worked on, only write that much. But try to match it up a bit with what they're asking you for, and
Yeah.
that's pretty much it. Yeah,
Yeah, that's pretty solid. Yeah, because you definitely need to find a way to stand out
exactly.
in like the crowded, saturated market we have now, and especially because now like the amount of jobs is a little bit less than it was like a 2021
Yeah, like job
slash a
market is
little bit of
again opening
2022.
up, but the frequency at which it is opening up is still that great. I believe by the end of maybe first quarter of next year, we might see some good news coming in because fresh quarter will be there.
Mhm.
Maybe there will be certain positive things that will happen. That's our optimistic side that says that there's no
Yeah,
statistic or to that. Okay, but considering all the new things that are coming up, new year is coming, new quarter is going to come up. Every company gets a new budget, so I believe there will be a lot more openings coming in. So make sure you prepare well before applying, so that while there would be more openings, you would not be investing your time in just preparing. So there's a
yeah.
saying that if you sweat before the war, you don't bleed in the war, right? So so
Oh, that's a
you
good
need to
saying.
prepare. You need to prepare now so that when there will be openings, you would be able to make it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. That's solid advice.
thanks.
Now I want to kind of transition and talk about. So, how did you get into iOS development? How did we all
Okay.
get started?
So when I was back in my college in the year 2016-17, I was in second year of engineering, and I came across this boot camp in our college that was at minimal cost. And one of the faculties that was conducting that boot camp was also one of my favorites at that time. So I thought I should consider, applying for that. And that boot camp has two options: either you learn iOS development or you learn Android development. So everyone around me used to say that iOS is cool and whatnot, so you should go for iOS, not Android. So I got influenced by the people around me, and I can go ahead with I decided to go ahead with iOS development. I also talked about this at my home. I used to discuss these things with my mom and my elder brother. They also advised me to go ahead with iOS versus the Android development. So I took my shot, and it worked for me. I learned the basics in the boot camp. I didn't get too much out of it,
Mm,
but it gave me a head start. So I learned the
yeah,
basics of Swift. From there, I started dragging, dropping things like buttons and whatnot in the UI storyboard and the main storyboard. And after that, when the boot camp ended, I started watching YouTube videos. There were some channels which are not available today, I guess. But there was one of them with the name Jared Davidson. I used to watch his videos. I used to watch
Oh, Jared
some other,
Davidson. Yeah.
yeah, I used to watch some other YouTubers' videos as at that point, and that not just made me learn iOS development, like all that collection of content, but also gave me an
Mhm.
idea or maybe inspiration, I should say, to start creating content myself. So looking at some of the videos, I thought, why can't I make a video as well, right? I don't know like why this idea came to my mind, but yeah, it came to my mind. So I decided to make a video maybe on a simple segue that we can put in between two view controllers. So I decided to to give a demo of how you can put in a segue programmatically and in the storyboard manner both the ways. So the first video that I created was back in 2017, and that's when I started learning iOS development more seriously. Also, I started creating content on YouTube. So that was my start into iOS development. And when my college completed in 2018, the only thing I knew out of my college was iOS development because I dedicated 2 of my years into that. Even when I started learning it,
Wait,
I was halfway. Yeah,
yeah. I have a
you.
question. So, like, what were you? What really? Because you were considering Android, right? Because Android has a big hold on like the India market, right?
Yeah.
So,
So
was there like one particular thing that pushed you over the edge to go Apple, or what? How was that decision process?
so the decision process was definitely this point was also considered while I was deciding this that okay, you should compare the demand and supply, right? So in India, there is a huge demand of Android developers and there is a huge supply as well of Android developers. Whereas if you talk about iOS development, iOS developers, there is a decent amount of demand of iOS developers in India, but a very poor supply at that point, like back in 2017, I'm saying. So I thought like I searched this on LinkedIn and whatnot, like how many developers are there. I just searched for their tags and whatnot. I had a rough data of what should be the best. So as a as my common sense says that okay,
Yeah.
you should go ahead with where the supply is less, and you can
Mhm.
have a great chance on that side, and that really worked. Okay, so I decided to go ahead with that.
Yeah.
Also, coming back to my journey of learning iOS development,
Mhm.
while I was creating videos, I was learning more topics into iOS development. I came across these seniors of mine at college that approached me while I got an internship as well at the same time as an iOS intern. They approached me the same day when I got selected into a company as an intern. They said that we want to build this application for residential societies in India, and we want to build Android and iOS application. And we know that you are learning as development these days, and you have a MacBook and whatnot, whatever is required. So why don't you join us? And we will be co-founders, and we will be doing this and that. So that really intrigued me at that point. I never thought of uh, getting into entrepreneurship at that time. The only idea that used to come to my mind at that point was, okay, I'll finish up my college and I'll do a job, I'll get a better job, and my life will be stable, I'll get settled. But that one thing changed my idea of how should I take my career forward. I worked with them for the whole year of 2018, and things didn't work well at the end, but that gave me a learning that there is not only one way to think about your career going ahead. You can do more than just a job. No
Ah,
disrespect to whoever does a job, but I'm just saying that there is more scope to what you can do or what you can pursue as a career after learning
yeah.
something. So yeah, in 2019, I had to decide what should I start with now because I just ended up with a startup that didn't work. So I
Mhm.
thought I should first get a job and then think about something else.
Yeah.
So so I started applying for it and I got my very first job at that point.
Mhm. Ah, I see. So the what was the hardest part in you when you were learning, like on your journey?
When I was learning, okay, I think I would not say the hardest part,
Yeah.
um, but I think maintaining the consistency to learn something, I would
Mhm.
say, not just iOS development, is really tough to manage, because when you are halfway through it, when you think that okay, I have covered most of the topics, then you leave what you're learning and you start doing other stuff. So at that time you have to recall why you started learning in the first
Mhm.
place, and that keeps you attached to the goal that you decided to go ahead with in the first place. So I think maintaining consistency while learning was the hardest part for me. Apart from that, there were few topics that were really confusing in the very beginning. For example, closures.
Yeah,
I think
closures.
I
Yeah.
think till 2018 I was confused about closures. I started learning in 2017, and till the end
Mhm.
of 2018 I was
Mhm.
still not sure about closures. I used to use them, but I was
Yeah.
not really sure about how do they work, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So I used to figure that at that time. So yeah, that was something that really that was really painful. But I really got some great seniors with me when I started working professionally, and
Mhm.
they really made things really simple for me, which I used to think were very complex in iOS development. Yeah,
Yeah, like when you're early on, I feel like that's very easy to do. Like, you can overcomplicate things, or you can think like
yeah,
it's you have to like be super technical, or like you basically just overthink like a topic or a thing, and when it's
right.
actually like simple and you don't need to
Exactly.
overcomplicate
Like,
things.
because I think our perception about ourselves at that point is also that we are new to it, so maybe this
Mhm.
topic is tough.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And when some people around you also say that okay, this topic is complex, whenever you will come across this topic, make sure that you read it well or you learn it well.
Mhm.
Then you already have this thing in mind that okay, this topic is going to be very complex for me.
Mhm.
So maybe those things also gave their contribution to why I've thought that this topic is complex. But yeah, I made my way through it, and till like today, I feel like uh, whenever you come across something new that you want to learn, even in iOS development or maybe some other tech stack, the initial 7 or 14 days will be really tough for you. If you survive those for 7 14 days, then you would be able to have a hold on that topic. Otherwise, just forget it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's true.
Because that really tests your patience. When you are stuck with a topic, you are not being able to run your code, you are
Yeah.
not being able to understand the error. Even when you search it on Google, you are not getting the answers. That's the time when you decide, do I really want to go ahead with this, or should I just shut down my
Yeah.
laptop and go? Yeah,
Yeah, what helps me is I try to like take a break, like because sometimes like, you get stuck and like it's better to like take a break than just sit there and like keep banging at your head at it.
that's true. That's true. There was like, this is coming like randomly to me, but if you don't mind telling me that, I was working with some company in 2020, and uh, I was asked to build a feature, okay,
Mhm.
in a certain way, like using a certain way of writing the code. So I initially did that and told my tech lead that okay, I have done this and I have raised a PR for that. Whenever you get the time, please, take a look at that. And then I went to evening walk, and while walking, I was thinking about the same problem that I just worked on, the same feature that I worked on,
Yeah.
and suddenly I I thought that what I have done is absolutely wrong. I need to go back and change it, completely. So I rushed back home, and and I made the changes right at that point. And I messaged him again that okay, have you checked it already, or are you going to check it out? He said I'll check it tomorrow. I was like, okay, thanks. So yeah, that happens. That really happens.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. So what is Swift Anytime to for the people who don't know?
Okay. So I hope that many of the viewers of yours maybe already know SwiftAnytime.com. But for those who don't know Swift Anytime, it's basically a learning platform and a upskilling platform for iOS developers who want to start their career and upskill themselves on the same journey. So starting from junior to senior to staff role, if you want to upskill yourself, if you want to continue learning, if you consistently want to grow as an iOS developer, then Swift Anytime is there for you. We are a community driven platform, and we consider the community's point, and based on that we create whatever we create. Currently, we have one new product on our website. You can find it out. It's Cracking the iOS Interview ebook. So that ebook is there for you to help you out with your next iOS interviews preparation. So if you find difficulty preparing for your next iOS interview, go check that out. I think Jason will, tag all
Yeah.
the links in the description so you can find it out
Yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah.
So that's Swift Anytime for you.
So what was the inspiration for Swift Anytime?
So the inspiration for SwiftAnytime was that when I used to learn iOS development in the very beginning
Mm,
phase, I used to find out few platforms from where I used to learn, and at some platforms I didn't even used to find the problems that I was looking forward to. So
mm,
I had this thing in mind when I started my career as professional iOS developer back in 2018, 2019,
mm.
that if I get the opportunity, I will also create a platform that can serve to the community where when somebody looks out for a certain problem or somebody wants to learn something new in iOS development, they can easily find that out on our platform. So it started with that approach. We made sure that this platform would be community driven. So we have a Slack channel where there is like more than 1,500 iOS developers who are connected with us, who share content, who discuss ideas, who write in code help whenever their bugs are not getting uh,
Yeah.
getting solved. So all these things happen. We organize the meetups so that we can reach out to the people and ask them what is that they are looking forward to in our
Mm,
development. So far we are limited to India only as far as meetups are concerned, offline meetups are concerned, and we want to take it to the whole world. We want to organize our meetups, in every corner of this world where tech exists. And in that
yeah.
mission, if you feel like Jason, even you, if you feel like you can join,
Yeah.
hands with us on the same, you're welcome for that. And
Yeah.
anybody who's listening
Come
to
to
this
Miami. Yeah.
and anyone who's listening to this podcast, if you feel like you resonate with this idea, you want to communicate with the community, you want to engage with the community, and you want to grow yourself with them,
Mm,
then consider joining Swift Anytime.
yeah. Perfect. I think I want to wrap it up here. I really enjoyed the conversation. Where can the people find you?
You can find me easily on Twitter with the username iOS Mayank, and
Mm,
I have a YouTube channel as well where you can watch the content that we create. It's
yeah.
again youtube.com/c/iOS Mayank. And to read the articles that we create, to look at the products that we are going to create and we have created, you can check out swiftanytime.com.
Yeah. Is that where they can find the book, right?
Yes, that's
SwiftAnytime.com.
where they can
Yeah.
find out the book. swiftanytime.com/cracking the iOS interview. That's the
Yeah.
URL. I'll share
Mhm.
that with you. You can maybe put it
Yeah.
here on the
Yeah.
screen.
All the links will be in the description.
Yeah, perfect, perfect.
Thank you guys for listening to another episode of the iOS Dev Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, feel free to share this with a fellow developer. And if you want to support the show, you guys can leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, whatever platform you're listening on. And even consider joining the Patreon. Lastly, check out iosdojo.io if you guys want to level up your skills or have some courses there. Peace.